Launch this second session. As Dr. Doppelbauer mentioned during his presentation, and it was also highlighted by Commissioner Vallien, we railways need to learn from other safety critical sectors, and it is the objective of this second session. And I have the pleasure to introduce Michaela Schwarz, who will facilitate this second session. She is a human and organizational factors and safety culture expert with a broad experience in the aviation industry. And lucky us, she joined the railways in 2021, right after 2019, right before the COVID. So a warm applause to Michaela Schwarz. It's your home.
Thanks, Gregory. Can you hear me? I usually have a very loud voice. Guten Morgen. Good morning, everyone. Also, a very warm welcome to our online participants. I hear we have about 70 online, so please, a very warm welcome here as well to the second session, which is learning from safety critical incidents, which is my passion, of course, because I come from aviation and I'm now honored to work in rail. And I'm an organizational psychologist, and I did my PhD in safety culture in aviation with a focus on how to predict safety-relevant behavior in operational staff. So I'm very honored to have this session to be able to represent two industries and then have two more, which is going to be maritime and nuclear power. To open the session, if we come back to the ERA safety culture model, F3 is learning from experience. It's a fundamental element of safety culture. And organizations that learn from other sectors and other organizations, I rate usually as more mature than the ones that don't do that. So I invite you here in this session to learn from the experience. And before I introduce you now to our speakers of the second session, I'm actually going to introduce the audience to the speakers. So if you three gentlemen could turn around so you can actually see people raising their hands. I'd like to know, please, in the audience, who here is an operational staff member who has an operational railway license. So let's start with train drivers. Train drivers? Yes. About 10. Train signalers or controllers? Yes, don't be shy. 2, 3. You're an important part of the picture. Yeah. Train attendants. Any train attendants? At least you. Brave. The only one, the train attendant. Fantastic. Engineers. Train engineering and mechanics. 2. Sort of. Okay. 3, 4, 5. Yeah, thank you very much. Now, who else do we have? Safety expert. Who is a safety expert? Safety management. There we go. This is the majority, yeah? But you know what? It's really important you speak to your operational people because otherwise the message will never, end to be there. So safety management. Regulators. Any authority, inspectors, regulators, huh? Please, you are the role models. You are the ones who can promote safety culture. Please do your job very well. And then, who else is missing from operational people? Did I miss anyone? Who else have we got? Train inspection? Oh, now that's an interesting one. Top managers don't raise their hands when I ask for safety experts. Thanks, Kim. Okay, so who is a manager in the room? Who is responsible for safety in this room? And I want all hands up, please. All hands up. Don't be shy. Everyone in this room is responsible for safety. Now, with that, I would like to adhere to the timing. The 20 minutes clock is there. I introduce you to your first speaker, which is Conrad Dube from Spain. Conrad is a nuclear engineer with 35 years of experience in the nuclear power industry. He is a safety culture expert, of course, having participated in missions of the IAEA, which is based in Vienna, the International Atomic Energy Agency, in France, in Ukraine, and in Brazil. He worked 10 years in the WANO, which is the World Association of Nuclear Operations in Paris, leading more than 100 expert missions of operational power plants around the world. He has also developed and delivered training for managers. So leadership is one of your big specialities. Of course, also safety culture, operational decision-making, and an invited lecturer on leadership for safety at the university, Technical University in Catalonia, in Barcelona. Please put your hands together for Conrad. And the way we're going to do this is going to be Conrad, then the second speaker, the third speakers, and we're going to have the questions in the end, please. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Conrad.
Okay, thank you. So, okay. Good morning, everybody. So, as Michaela said, my name is Conrad Dube, and I'm currently an independent nuclear consultant. And I'm a former program manager at the World Association of Nuclear Operations, which has been referred to. This is the organization that I worked during 10 years, and I conducted that amount of missions in several nuclear power plants. So let me start with some words about nuclear safety. The nuclear industry has 70 years of experience. This is 1/3 of the history of railways. However, it is enough to have accumulated sufficient experience to state that it is also a mature industry. Since its conception, the use of nuclear energy has been characterized by a perception of high risk for the enormous damage that it can cause if not properly controlled. This enormous destructive capacity became clear to the world with the atomic bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as you all know. However, there are physical reasons and technical reasons to state that a nuclear power plant is far from an atomic bomb, and that a nuclear explosion is not possible in such facilities. For the nuclear plants, the risk of core melt with the release of radioactivity has been, from the first reactors to nowadays, the design basis accident to avoid. It is what we call severe nuclear accident. There have been several severe nuclear accidents, like Chernobyl in 1986. I don't know, it's, yeah, the big one, okay. In which there was a core melting with an important release of radioactivity to the environment. The analysis attributed to the accident to deficiencies of management, supervision, and safety culture. After the accident, the World Association of Nuclear Operations was created to promote international collaboration to prevent a similar accident in the future. 5 years later, in 1991, the International Atomic Energy Agency defined and developed the concept of safety culture for the nuclear community because of its relation to the accident. A more recent accident occurred in 2011 in Fukushima. Though the close to 20,000 casualties were due to the tsunami, not to the nuclear event, there was a significant impact in 4 of the 6 reactors of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant due to the emergency diesel generators becoming unavailable because of the flooding, causing a release of radioactivity to the environment that, as you know, has lasted until now. The possibility of internal and external events with severe consequences had been underestimated in the design. And there was a lack of recognition of the importance of emergency preparedness to cope with extreme conditions. So, looking at that, it seems that there were also some safety culture issues. The results of the analysis of the accident identified amongst the causes lack of learning from experience, poor question and attitude, lack of conservatism in the decisions, lack of learning from experience, isolationism, lack of nuclear oversight, we can call it oversight, and complacency. So now looking at all those topics, it becomes clear that it was safety culture. Let me present now an accident that probably you have not heard about, but for its relevance in the area of safety culture became a reference for the nuclear industry. It's the Davis-Besse event. The Davis-Besse nuclear power plant is located in Ohio in the United States. In March 2002, a degradation of the material of the reactor pressure vessel head was discovered, being caused by primary water stress corrosion cracking of the control rod drive mechanisms and boric acid corrosion. Sorry about the technical aspects, but this is what it was. But it was not purely technical. Ultrasonic tests discovered cracking in vessel head penetration nozzles and a 17 centimeters corrosion hole in the carbon steel of the reactor head, like a baseball ball size. An accident was prevented only due to a 0.5 centimeter stainless steel inner liner which had not corroded. So there was no accident. In fact, that's the reason that you probably didn't hear about it. The plant remained shut down for 2 years after the accident. There are some elements to consider in this event that make it significant, despite the fact that it had no consequence for people or the environment, but could have been very serious if discovered just a few days later. Davis-Besse was one of the best performing plants in the United States, according to the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, similar like one in the United States, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is the regulatory agency. In the report of the event, it was concluded that, over time, the plant appeared to become complacent. In many areas, a minimum compliance standard existed in management and thus throughout the Davis-Besse organization. The plant did not use internal and external operating experience effectively, and in many areas became isolated from the industry. It was also stated that there was a lack of sensitivity to nuclear safety, and the focus was to justify existing conditions. The overall conclusion was that management ineffectively implemented processes and thus failed to detect and address plant problems as opportunities arose. I insist that it was one of the best performing plants in the United States. These were the root causes of the event after the analysis. In the last years, there was a shift in the focus at all levels of the organization from implementing high standards to justifying minimum standards. There was an excessive focus on meeting short-term production goals. There was a lack of management oversight. There was symptom-based problem solving rather than going to the root causes. Justification of plant problems, again, rather than addressing the root causes. Isolationism, ineffective use of operating experience, and workers not raising questions about abnormal conditions. I don't know if all those things sound familiar to you as safety experts. So the safety culture was the main problem, as all of those are elements of safety culture. These root causes, as well as the recommendations to all plants, were collected in a report called One of Significant Operating Experience Report, SOER 2003.2, which you see the cover in the slide. And these were the recommendations to all plants. Discuss the event with managers and supervisors. Conduct a self-assessment of safety culture with emphasis in the leadership skills. And identify abnormal, unexpected, or degrading conditions in your plant. So this is an abstract of the main recommendations to all the nuclear industry. The 1 SOERs apply to all nuclear plants worldwide. And the recommendations are considered internally in each plant as requirements. Therefore, nowadays, all nuclear power plants conduct and receive safety culture assessments in their plants. Also, note that it requires emphasis in the leadership skills. We will speak later about leadership in safety culture, because that's fundamental. So, why safety culture and not simply safety management? Well, I will give you some answers to that. Because the culture of the organization will determine how it will respond to the safety challenges. Because safety culture weaknesses have been identified as a main contributor in all major nuclear and non-nuclear accidents, like in 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima. Because without proper safety leadership, the organization tends to accept risks as it gains experience. Because nuclear accidents are very unlikely, but with huge impact. Because nuclear technology and any other technology is not intrinsically safe. Humans and organizations make it safe. And because complacency and overconfidence are the worst challenges to safety. So, if we agree that culture is the key, what makes culture change if we want to improve that? Well, culture changes by natural evolution. Culture changes by contact with other cultures, like what we are doing here. Culture changes when confronted with crisis, like an accident, for example, like big accidents change the culture in all the sector. Or a pandemic, for example, changes the culture. Technology changes. We have the case of internet or the mobile phones. We will have the example of artificial intelligence. All these things change the worldwide culture. But we can also make a change using a process, change management process, management tools. But on top of that, we can make a change by good leadership. I would say leadership is the key to change culture. In fact, when we assess safety culture in an organization, the issues encountered tend to point to the leadership, and also the solutions proposed in the form of recommendations require the leadership involvement. So, in the following slides, I will present some common issues identified in safety culture assessments conducted by WANO in several nuclear power plants. This is due to my own experience, as well as recommendations that have been given to the plants to address those issues. I included in this slide a photo from one of those assessments conducted in 2019 in the Beloyarsk nuclear power plant. This is a very special plant. It's one of the few plants in the world of fast breeder reactor, and in fact the largest fast neutron power reactor in the world. It's located in Russia. And I want to call your attention to one of the mission team members in the photo. It is Gregory Rolina, one of our hosts, who participated as invited expert from the railroad industry, as I am now participating in this event as an invited expert from the nuclear industry. And for those that didn't locate him, he's here. So let's move to my selection of issues and recommendations. This is just my own experience, so it's my sample. First area, human performance. The first common issue in this area is unclear or absence of expectations for human error reduction tools. Recommendations for this issue are to establish and communicate a set of human error reduction tools and provide training on their use. The second common issue in human performance is the lack of peer-to-peer challenge. For this issue, we would recommend presence of management in the field, leading by example, and management to welcome being challenged as well. A third common issue would be human error reduction tools not being used. For this issue, the recommendation is to use task observation and coaching to reinforce the use of the established human error reduction tools. And I have included in the bottom some common human error reduction tools used in the nuclear power plants. You will get all these in PDF, by the way, at the end of the workshop. A second area is learning from experience. One common issue is poor reporting culture. For this issue, we can recommend to set up or ensure the existence of an easy process to report, even anonymously. Communication is also vital to ensure that all personnel know when and how to report. And finally, but most important, the use of task observation and coaching to reinforce the need to report low-level events and near misses. Another common issue is isolationism. You've seen it in the accidents that I presented. Normally, it is a consequence of overconfidence and complacency. They go hand in hand, with the false assumption that we have nothing to learn from others. And in this case, we recommend the use of benchmarking with other organizations, reinforcing the use of external operating experience, and active participation in international exchange forums like this one. A third common issue in this area is insufficient use of low-level events and near misses. In this case, we recommend to establish objectives for reporting and analysis, communication, and reinforce reporting. And finally, poor analysis of events. Recommendations would be to define expectations for the method and depth of the analysis by event category and provide training on the methods to be used. A third area is operational decision making. I think that this area is more wide or broad than the one that you have in your culture map, because it applies to degrading conditions, abnormal, and these applies to decisions taken by the management team. These are decisions to be taken normally by the management team when conditions arise which are not included in existing procedures and have some degree of uncertainty. What to do in case of uncertainty when something is not reflected in a procedure or in a norm. These include non-conforming, degraded, or negatively evolving conditions. In case of absence of an operational decision-making process, because we set up a process for that, it is strongly recommended to develop it based on 6 principles, the principles that you see on the screen. 1, recognize and report degrading conditions and safety margins. 2, clearly define roles and responsibilities for the decision-making process. For example, that would include a facilitator and a devil's advocate. 3, clearly define the problem and its potential consequences. 4, assess short and long-term risks and the potential combined effects of different options. And 5, develop an implementation plan, compensatory measures, and a backup plan, assuming the worst outcome. The 6th one, in fact, is the closing loop to improve the process. Periodically review the decisions taken and improve the operational decision-making process as needed. If the operational decision-making process is not used when or how it should have been used, provide training to the management team on the application of an operational decision-making process. We in WANO conducted a standard 3 days ODM training to the management team in many power plants worldwide. Finally, another area would be the management presence in the field, which I have referred to also in the previous issues. And the workshop that I will facilitate will have to do with that. The common issue would be management not present in the field, having as a consequence poor safety behaviors expectations not followed, events, etc. Our recommendation is to conduct manager in the field training for all levels of management, implement a task observation program involving all managers and supervisors, and focus on reinforcing high standards and emphasizing a coaching, questioning approach to giving feedback. So finally, let me make a very brief reference to the importance of leadership in safety culture. Leaders play an important role in building and maintaining safety culture, but also can easily spoil it. It takes time, persistence, and patience to improve and maintain safety culture, but a single bad leadership example can cause a very negative effect, and very quickly. Thank you for your attention, and I wait for your questions.
If you take a seat. Thank you very much, Conrad, also for sticking to the time limit. Please write down your questions. We'll keep questions in the end. Also, the online audience, please use Slido to post your questions. We'll come back to the end. Conrad, you made a really important point, and that is proactively learning from a near-miss event like the Davis-Bessie. It was not an accident. That's why we haven't heard about it in Ohio. Learning from that. And when I ask organizations, tell me what's going on, they always tell me the accidents, the bad stuff. We go as far as spats, maybe, signals past the danger, but then it stops. So it's really the proactive side of things. And you mentioned 3 things in learning from experience, which is a reporting culture, questioning attitude, leadership, of course, and then how you deal with errors and mistakes. And this is my lead-in to Marc Baumgartner, to introduce to you Marc Baumgartner from Switzerland, from IFATCA, who is very knowledgeable on an element of safety culture, well, safety culture as a general, but an element which is just culture. Who knows what just culture is in this room? Very good, about a third, I would say, so it's great that we have Marc here. So Marc has been working as an operational air traffic controller. Very important that you have that operational knowledge and supervisor in the Geneva Area Control Center for more than 25 years. And he also chaired the Eurocontrol Performance Review. Eurocontrol is the aviation agency supporting safety in Europe. And he was also the president and CEO of the International Federation of Air Traffic Controllers Associations, IFATCA, the unions, which is important because they help you when something goes wrong and they advise you what to do. Now, quick question, who is a union member in this room? I know at least one, who is my colleague. Okay, a few, 4, 5, I counted, Marc. Marc also coordinates CESAR, Single European Sky Initiative, and is the EASA activities. And in collaboration with Eurocontrol, he has been conducting for more than 10 years the legal prosecutor expert courses, which is very crucial to develop a just culture because they need to know and understand the working conditions. So without further ado, Marc Baumgartner, please join us on the floor. Please put your hands together for Marc. It's also 20 minutes for you, Marc. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a bit embarrassed by all what Michaela just said. So I will try with you in the 20 minutes to talk a little bit about something which is very close to my heart, just culture. I start with something which has nothing to do with air traffic control or aviation, the canary in the coal mine. In the past, I don't know if they still do that, the miners took a canary with them in a cage like this into the mine. As long as the canary was singing or was alive, the miners were safe. As soon as the canary stopped singing or was lying on the back in this cage, they knew they had to run. Okay? Here is a picture. There was even oxygen, so they treated the canary very well. When it fell, I don't know, into unconsciousness or stopped singing, they gave him oxygen and they were running out with him out of the mine. So let's go back to aviation. Nice summer day, 2002, 2004, in Geneva. We have the highest mountains in Western Europe with the Mont Blanc. And there is a pilot announcing on the frequency, Mayday, Mayday. We are making an emergency descent because we have a cracked windshield. The pilot did not see any more outside. What does that mean? Depressurization means you have to plunge the aircraft to below 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters, that you can breathe again normally. For the passengers, keep your safety belt on when you are seated, because in a moment like this, they descend and they plunge, and if you are not strapped in your seat, you fly around. That's a free tip from my side. So the pilot said, I'm blind, a broken windshield, I need to descend. You have the mountains below. And he said, how far can I descend? How far can I descend? And we have minimum safe altitudes, meaning that there is some distance between the terrain and the aircraft. And so here the pilot says, I need to descend further, I need to descend further. And the controller said, I have no clue. I have no clue how far you can go, below the minimum safety altitude. So the controller was able to report that, and since then, we know into the valleys how far the aircrafts could go should something like this happen again. Here, a little bit what we are doing, a little bit. Movement crossing the Atlantic in the morning, at 1 o'clock in the morning Europe time. The yellow parts are aircraft, 27,000, 30,000 movements, a busy day in Europe. To put that in relations, if I'm not wrong, an ICE train is approximately 3 Boeing 747 or approximately 728, 737 Airbus 320. So to give you also a perspective of that. Towards the morning, Europe is filling up. You have London, Paris, Frankfurt getting busy. And you see also from where it's coming a little bit, as mentioned, you have 24 hours, something ongoing over your skies. Even if we had a drop during the COVID times, we still had planes flying around, the cargo planes. What is an air traffic controller doing? From the moment the door closes in an aircraft at departure until the arrival at the airport, there's always an air traffic controller in the ear of the pilot who tells him what to do. We don't fly the aircraft, but we tell the pilot, you're allowed to start the engine, you're allowed to taxi, you're allowed to take off. The pilot can't do anything without us telling him what to do. So you will be an expert in air traffic control after the next 3 slides, just to explain you that. Normally what you see, you don't hear from us except if it goes wrong. Okay? So, but you see sometimes at the airport a tower cabin which controls the vicinity of an airport, 20 kilometers, what you see. That's here with this cylinder. And then we have an intermediate airspace, so-called terminal airspace, TRACON in the United States, where you actually line up the aircraft to land or make them take off. And above that, you have a system of highways in the sky, going over the whole planet. And these highways are layered. So you have 300 meters between 2 layers. So when you cross an aircraft, it's just 300 meters below or above, or horizontally speaking, 5 nautical miles, which is approximately 9 kilometers. And we have quite a complicated infrastructure which makes the aircraft visible for the air traffic controller. That's the radar or satellite. We talk to the pilots, also terrestrial VHF or via satellite. And the pilots are navigating along some routes, bonfires in the past, nowadays a lot with satellite navigation. They follow, you see here this map. So the whole world has highways in the sky, okay? Now I'd like to come back to a bit of just culture. In the past, maybe it was worse than now. So I took this one here just to show that nowadays it's not always for the good, but anyhow. So 2 examples. The first one, short-term conflict alert is a safety net. When everything goes wrong, we have an alert, and there is a lady in my center, in other centers, a man's voice coming and saying, conflict, 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 do something, turn this aircraft, make something. Huh? It doesn't say that, it just says conflict. And it shows it visually or things like this. In the past, when you had an alarm like this, you were suspended. Nobody asked any questions. I said, okay, you had this, you must have made an error, okay? So we had a magic button, we could just switch it off. So we switched it off. That was the compromise. Get suspended or just miss the biggest catastrophe in the air, things like this. Another example from the past, that is a slide, or a toboggan as we call in Frenchish. This is used with electronical means to line up the aircrafts when they come and land. Okay? The controller's job is take the aircraft from the en route sector, put it on top of the slide, and then the pilot will slide down with electronical means onto the center line with the right altitude. That, if I click once again, gives then from the ground, here you have Heathrow, every 90 seconds an aircraft which more or less is aligned on the center line and is going down towards the runway. The example from the past, the controllers had to put these aircrafts into the black circle or in the semicircle. If they missed it, an alarm went off, they were suspended immediately, no questions were asked. So what did the controller do? In order not to get suspended, they increased the distance between the aircrafts on this slide, and that, in a place like Heathrow, caused 1 to 2 hours delay at the end of the day. Okay? So, as well, an example from the past. Aviation is sometimes, when we talk about reporting, just culture, safety culture, being labeled as a success story. And yes, we are. In the sense, when you look at this, without going into the details, we simply can't learn from accident anymore. Luckily, there are not enough accidents for us. So we need to learn from something else. We need to learn from near misses, incidents. How do you learn from them? You have seen that, and I will not go too much into details because Michaela just mentioned that she did a PhD on that, so I might say stupid things, which she might have to correct me afterwards. But safety culture is if you're flexible, if you're able to learn, if you are reporting, and if you are informed, if you get the temperature. And for that, you need to have an incentive that the people do report. And for that, you need to give them some sort of a caveat, which we call just culture. So we want to learn from incidents. Nobody gets hurt when you see on the left-hand side. Nobody gets hurt by a container in a jet engine. It costs a little bit, but nobody's hurt, okay? On the middle one, you have 3 aircraft in about 3 minutes crossing over one point. Nobody gets hurt, but it could be something which is an incident or which didn't go as well as imagined. So what we need next to the safety data, because we collect terabytes of data, transatlantic flight, a normal transatlantic flight gives you 4 terabytes of data, just normal operations and things like this. So we get a lot of data, but we also need to know what is the operator thinking, what is the air traffic controller doing, why is he doing that? And for that you need as well to be able to talk, tell your story. So I have here another example just also for you. These are the black boxes, which are orange, of flight recorders, where you get also all the accident or incident information. So safety information is a source of knowledge. It's absolutely important to ask the person who was at the coalface, why did you do that? Why did it make sense at that moment to you? okay? And here I give another example. We call the aircrafts with a name, a nickname. Lufthansa 44 Kilo, Ryanair 44 Charlie, in this example. I say to the Kilo, descend, and the other one understands it's for him, and I tell the other one, climb, so they mix it up. And of course, it's an air miss. You haven't read about this in the newspaper, so everything was safe after it. But these are things I can explain afterwards in a report. But now we are lucky or unlucky. We just don't want to learn only. We have to comply with international regulations like ICAO, it's the International Civil Aviation Organization, like the European Union. I need now to report everything, even if I go to the toilet. Now, some of you might laugh, but if you're a single controller in a control tower at 4 o'clock in the morning and you go out for the loo because you need to, and the door which opens and closes the tower is a door which is locked from the inside, when you come back from the loo, you might have an issue because the tower is closed and the aircrafts are turning. So it's a real example as well. So there is, of course, not just futile things like this, but we will be trying to explain everything. But when you explain or inform the system, you're also exposing yourself. I went to the loo at 4 o'clock in the morning, or I turned this aircraft right because I thought that was intelligent. Okay? So you are also the source of the mistake, the mishap, the error. And that leads to some sort of a legal concept which is called the mnemotenetur, means you're self-incriminating. You're feeding the system with intelligence, but at the same time, you're saying, it was me. Okay? And therefore, we needed to have a concept where we can feel safe to report. That's what we call the just culture. And this just culture basically is something where you actually try to disclose what you had, but that you feel safe in what you're doing. What just culture is not, it's not a blanco check, it's not a blame-free environment, but it's also not anymore a punitive culture. It's something in between. And the something in between has been regulated by the European Union, which is where we think, and I leave that, it's in the slides, in the handouts, where we think you have acted in good, let's say, faith, without gross negligence, willful violation, and destructive acts, you will get away in a way or another. The way in another needs to be defined because we also need to keep a balance between a reckless behavior, which is extremely seldom, but which can assist. James Reason has been mentioned maybe already before. It comes from there, managing the risk of organization accident. You have seen the Swiss cheese models. This is used, the barrier models. And for some of you, if you are interested, just culture has been described by Professor Sidney Dekker. What does it mean? It means the safety data, the safety information is protected. And here you have a lot of legal instruments. The reporter is protected to a certain extent. So if I report, not everything can be used, okay? And there is also a definition in the legal system or in the law text of the EU which talks about just culture. Here, what does it mean? You see, once you have reported, based on your report, no inquiry should be started, okay? There are certain exemptions, and we might be able to talk about them later on, where the people get access. Prosecutors, press, and things like this. It's not very helpful. You can't use the information which is inside a report to go against a person. So you can't say, you have been playing on your phone at 4 o'clock in the morning, we checked it. So that is something you have to make an independent investigation. And of course, the employers are not allowed to expose their employees based on a safety report. This is a challenging notion for many in our domain. It's a challenging notion for management because you give away some sort of control. It's also a challenging notion, just culture, an unknown notion for judiciary. And for that, we have reached out to the prosecutors in Europe, judges, prosecutors, legal expert, legal university professor, where we try to bring them together with operational people, pilots, air traffic controller, and we talk about just culture. Until now, we have nearly had 300 people in these courses where we train in 2.5 days. The people, and Kim was there very present, so thank you as well for all the support you have been able to give there. It is very, very interesting if you come into a room with prosecutor and they tell you, just culture, never heard of. And you're not above the law. I'm the law. I'm going to tell you what was right and wrong. And then you say, oh, that was a go-around. He says, I closed the airport. Sorry? A go-around is what? A go-around is when you have this aircraft on the toboggan, and then, for whatever reason, there's still another aircraft on the runway, or the runway is blocked because there's a car there, okay? And then you have a procedure where it says, go around. This is a 2-3 manipulation by the pilot. The aircraft goes up and there. That's also important that you stay seated until the aircraft is at the gate. Because sometimes, you know, you're like, finally landing, it has been an 8-hour flight. And whoom, we make a go around and everything shakes again. So things like this is very, very important for aviation safety. To an expert in penal law, that's dangerous. That's an unusual situation. That's dangerous. Therefore, the proposal of the prosecutor that he will close down the airport until this unsafe acts would stop. So basically, these courses are there to bridge the gap. Is also the invitation today to bridge the gap, to come here and be able to have the privilege to talk to you on this issue. And nearly the last slide. So another example, recent example, not from me, colleagues from the US. You have the air traffic controller, lousy drawing, I agree. So he imagined to tell to the pilot, go to the right, the dotted line, and then you go to runway 36, you line up, and you take off. The pilot, read back correct. But in the end, the real path was in front of the active runway, and there was an aircraft actually taking off. And maybe some of you have seen that. So the controller sees it at the very last moment and instructs the aircraft which is taking off to abort the takeoff. Again, last tip for passengers. If they tell you to put your staff below the seat in front of you and that you shouldn't have things there, believe me, if an aircraft aborts a takeoff, this is something which is a car crash at 300 kilometers an hour. And it stands still within about 100 meters. So it's violent, it's massively violent. So, as mentioned, put your back in front of the thing. So things like this where you can actually report. And finally, just culture can be maybe best described by the canary in the coal mine. So it's a little cage around him. We have to behave, we have to report, but we are also essential that we are being protected, because otherwise the breathing of the aviation system, of our employers, and the system as a whole is at stake. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Marc, also for excellent on-time performance. Aviation is very good in there. Let me summarize briefly before we come to our third speaker. Now that you are an expert in air traffic control, and also it makes sense to be a good passenger, what did Marc say? Marc said, in the past, in air traffic control, people asked the who if someone made a mistake, right? Who was it? Nowadays, or in the, as they matured on in aviation, we ask, why did it happen? The who is not so important, because the who will be dealt with anyway by the organization or by the prosecutors if it was rightfully to prosecute. Now, the why, please take that along. Ask why at least 5 times. And we also want to take along that we want to learn from near misses. And we're going to delve further into that in the Q&A session. I would like to take you now from the air into the water, okay? As a lead-in, unfortunately, we start again with an accident, Costa Concordia. I'm sure everybody has heard of Captain Schettino and the grounding at the island of Giglio. There's a lot we can learn from that, and there's a lot of perspectives that you can have. And Raphaël Baumler will take you into the maritime world within the next 20 minutes. Raphaël is from France. He holds a PhD in risk management and focuses his academic work on the impact of vessel socio-economical environment on safety and environment. I always like when you bridge academia and practice, because I do that as well. Huh? Professor Baumler ended his 20 years lifelong career. He actually told me, I'm done with the engineering, Michaela, as a master on a large container ship. He participates or leads IMO capacity building activities. You need to help me with the IMO. International Maritime Organization, thank you very much. Developing countries and conducts research, of course, including European Commission-funded projects related to human factors in shipping and the implementation of environmental regulations. So let's go into the water, into maritime, to hear a bit on safety culture and how it is dealt with. Raphaël, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to have been invited by ERA. I was very surprised when I received the message. I was thinking it was a spam. So usually people don't really know about shipping, and we're not very often invited. And I think it's pretty interesting to have this invitation. First of all, I just want to remind you a little bit what is shipping today. It's basically unknown. It's invisible, so it's unknown. And this is a big problem of shipping, and for the safety as well. When I say it's unknown, you don't know that shipping is everywhere around yourself. Everything that you have in the room has probably been shipped directly or transferred by raw material that came from ships. All the oil that you are using, all the gas now that we are using now in Western countries is also coming from ships. Shipping is major, and shipping is very, 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 very old. When I say very, very, very old, it was interesting. We had, just before the meeting, we had this small point. Yeah, railway is about 200 years. No, for us, we have evidence of shipping about 100,000 years. And shipping is at the birth of the first civilization, and you will see that all the first civilization, these ancient cities and city-states around Mesopotamia have been made with the supply of ships and the shipping system. So we are a very, very old system. And it's probably because we are very, very old, that's probably we are very different in how we work and how the industry has been organized. Because here what I'm going to talk about is very much related to how the industry is shaping safety. Not only safety as a technique, not only safety as some tools and best practice, but safety has inherently a sociological history. And this is where is shipping for me. Okay, I'll try this. Okay. So here I just have a small definitions. Probably not the best one, but I want to highlight something very specific in these definitions, which was presented at the IMO, International Maritime Organization, by the government of the UK in 2003. It's the idea of informed endeavor to reduce risk, etc. The idea of information. We need information. I think I'm just going to repeat what have been said since this morning, but the idea of information. How can we have information? What type of information? Is the information that we have able to provide meaningful elements in order to change, in order to adapt, in order to move our industry or the system? So here I would just remind you of very, very basic things about basic learning mechanisms, the way we tend to learn them in a very engineering approach way of it. So this is a basic principle of feedback. Feedback loop, input, what you need for a system like a ship to operate. What is the output of the system, what you want, so basically a transportation system, for example, here. And you need to have basically an acceptable safety level. And here that's very interesting also to always keep in mind that any system is designed to achieve a specific objective. And safety is one of the elements. But safety is not always the objective. You are not going to design a system just to not operate it. So you want the system to be productive, to do something, basically to gain the benefits of what you are designing the system for. And safety is more or less here, always. For us in shipping, it's very clear. We have this tension, which is permanent between productivity and safety. And you have this tension everywhere, I would say. You have this tension in railways, you have this tension in aviation, but where do you position the both objective of the system may be a little bit different. Is safety first? Is money making first? Is it in between? Is it equal? And all of this is very important, is how we define the position of safety here. So basically, we have the output. If we want to have some information about what's happening, we collect, and this is called the feedback mechanism. Very well known, very simple. And according to this feedback, you learn, and you improve the system. Super easy. This is a very basic engineering design. It works basically everywhere. OK, feed forward. I would say it's a little bit different, but we talked about it. I think the twinning too is very interesting to highlight this. It was interesting also to hear my colleague from the nuclear industry saying, yes, we underestimate the external disturbance. I would say in shipping, we underestimate the internal disturbance. We are very good in determining the external ones for hundreds of thousands of years. So basically, we know that, but we have another problem. We don't know how the ships operate, and we don't really want to know how the people are working on ships and what is the safety inside the system. We're very good in looking outside. Inside, it's a little bit more complicated. So here, the idea of feed forward is to anticipate the problem. Looking around, what is the environment, and how the environment can impact the system functioning. And also looking at inside the vessel of the system or the railway or inside the plane and see how the people behave on the day-to-day operation. And from this, you come back, you adjust feed-forward loop, you anticipate the problem. We can call it also risk management. Okay, so there is this idea. And here what I would like to highlight, it's what is very important in this analysis of the environment of the system outside, but also inside. It's very important not only to use numbers, not only to use quantitative data, but to use also qualitative data. And I think the example that we have this morning with the twinning tool was pretty interesting because it shows how important it is to talk to operators. The problem is all this learning basics, so collecting information, what you need basically for that to work, to have available information, so the information exists, and the information is reliable. And you need also to have an information flow which is operative. The idea of operation flow, I think, was very well explained before on the idea of just culture. So available, reliable data. So where are we now in shipping? I say, where are we now? Because it's very much now what you are going to see. So here, this is a series of a lot of extract from different news from what we call the Lloyd's list, which is the most important shipping news since the late 18th century. Yes, this is a very old publication. But what is very interesting is said here. Nearly 40% of very serious casualties do not result in a flag state investigation being published. Even when government do manage the file to file the mandatory reports, many of them fail to meet the basic standards set out for reporting. What does it mean? What does it mean here? Who is in charge of casualty investigation? States. Yes. You want to say something? Yes, please. No worry. So states are in charge, basically, of casualty investigation, and it's also mandated by international regulations. But what we see here is 40% do not do it. Nearly half, I would say. Yes, please. Yeah, coastal state can do. You can have different parties can do. It depends from the location. But 40% still. 40% of the flag state when it's happening. It's basically half of the shipping industry we don't know. It's not produce. It's basically also because in shipping industry we have something very specific. We have what everybody knows as the flag of convenience. We have flags basically, and the idea of convenience is interesting. The industry tend to oppose this idea of convenience, saying, yes, it's open registry. It's very much positive, but here is a question of rhetoric. It's how you play with words. The idea of convenience is interesting. It's very convenient not to look of the problem. Super convenient, huh? So you have a flag of convenience. Convenience for labor law, convenience for safety, convenience for low level of inspection regime, convenience for many things, and including convenience for this idea of casualty investigation. So it's very, very interesting to see that when you are a big ship owner or a small ship owner, it's very convenient to choose your legislation. And today you have the absolute capacity to choose wherever you want to register your vessel. So some can be very convenient, definitely. And here we can see the consequences. The consequence is that there is a system which has been more or less, we can say, organized not to learn, because we don't have the feedback. We don't want this feedback. This is another element. Can we learn with people on board the ship? Can we learn? And this is the idea of near misses. Unfortunately, here, what has been provided in the research is no. It's very nice to have a requirement of near misses, and this is what we have on ships. People are not doing it. And why they are not doing it, I think here it's a 2011 document, but there is more recent ones highlighting the same thing. Ineffective regulatory infrastructure, weak employment practices. People are afraid. We are living in a sector where people are commodities. People are employed for one ship, one moment, 6 months, 12 months, and goodbye. At the end of the vessel, you are assessed. If you are not assessed properly, or if there is no job, you are out of the sector. So there is an absence of unions. I think it was very interesting what you say. Who are the unions? Yeah, the unions are also very important because they can reply, they can provide information of what's happening on the system itself, and a little bit beyond just simple numbers. So very interesting. So all this makes that it's completely inappropriate to have a good incident reporting in shipping industry today. Today, maybe not in the future. Another problem here, it's also happening on board ships. We have a culture of systemic acceptance of the existence of violation and recording malpractices by seafarers, the people on board, the companies, and also the authorities. This is a work that we've done in a very recent past, and we're still working on this one, and we find always the same results. It has been highlighted for a long time already. Here it's on fatigue management. I don't know if you're aware of the regulatory framework that we have in shipping in terms of fatigue and working time. I will highlight a little bit, just for you to have an idea where we are. And when we talk human factors, we have a lot of things to say. So today, any ship in the world, seafarers can work up to 14 hours per day and night, and there is no definition of night, 7 days a week. So it makes, this is what is legal. Huh? I'm not talking about practice, I'm talking what is in the law. In European law, international law, this is what is in the law. Huh? 98 hours per week is authorized without 1 day rest, and you can stay on board. Some contracts are up to 10 months. So 10 months, working 14 hours a day, 98 hours a week, with no rest for 10 months. This is the situation you have. So, and in addition to this, what is interesting, when the people record their hours of work and rest, and when there is violations, they don't report it. So they work, in fact, beyond this, and night and day. So this is the situation what we have in shipping. So we have basically here, I want to highlight the importance of data. Huh? And here we have a very serious problem of data, and all the data sources are wrong. Another important element about the data here is coming from the shippers, basically the person that will place the goods in the containers to be sent away. We estimate, some of the insurance companies estimate that 5% of containers shipped may consist of undeclared dangerous goods. Undeclared dangerous goods. 5% looks small, but we have big ships. 5,000 TEU container ship makes 200 containers. We don't know. There is dangerous cargo inside. We have no idea. How can we develop any risk management? For a 20,000 TEU container ship, it's 1,000 containers that we don't know. 1,000 containers potentially with hazardous material, without any information. It's not a surprise that for the last decade, basically, with the biggest container ship that we have now, there is very regularly massive fire on container ship. With people dying, you have also massive explosion in container ports. That's quite a surprise, no, when you see this figure? Not so much, huh? Basically, without this quality data, we cannot have any risk management at all. Here, this is the most recent thing that I found just before when I was preparing my presentation here. It's happened in the United States. There have been one shipping company has been condemned for a very simple reason, because they didn't accept it, a seafarer, to report to the authority something wrong about safety. The idea for the US government said, no, these people have the right to report anything related to safety. But the company is continuing to fight against, employing a lot of lawyers to make this voice stop. So that's interesting to see the status of this industry. So, looking at this, it looks very, very bleak picture. Huh? But on the other hand, you can see that shipping is very resilient because we exist for 100,000 years. Huh? So, you know, it's... But we don't have any more wooden vessels. Now we are talking massive ships with a lot of cargo, a lot of passengers. Okay, 5 minutes? Okay, it's going to be okay. You can imagine I can talk hours. So we've been working, and it's very interesting. And here we have a friend from Deep Blue that we have been working with, and Eurocontrol. We have been working in partnership between us, maritime, and aviation people, and it was very interesting. So we had the aviation people looking with a different eye. And this is why it's interesting to have the other people looking at you also, from other sectors looking at you, and yourself looking at them. I think it's also very rich, this exchange of this. We have completely different perspective. We cannot give you what works in our system and what works in the system, bring it and give to another system. It doesn't work very much. You have to adapt things to your own sector and to the complexity of this sector, because the idea is very much complexity of sector. So when we work with the aviation sector, we find basically what you had before. Superficial investigations. The idea of operational factor is completely forgotten in shipping, but it's purposely made. It's not people shipping are stupid. Huh? It's not at all. Huh? It's because you don't want to see, because if you do it, you have problems. So don't see, don't report, don't make any waves. That's how it works with system. Reporting and data sharing do not reflect reality, and here it was specifically when we were investigating the idea of near misses. Lack of trustful relationships, always going together, of course, between frontline operators, companies, authorities. Nobody trusts anyone. So we are in a situation where no one trusts anyone, and I think it's very important also as a takeaway. Trust is at the core of everything. Safety learning, you need quality data, quantity data. You need qualitative and quantitative data. You need also, at the core of it, trust and motivation. If you have missing trust and motivation, you have no learning at all. And it's only from the learning that we can take the good conclusion, have a good information system, and implement the conclusion, make the changes. So this is where we are in shipping. People are a problem, because people are not people in shipping. People are commodities. They are in a global market where you exchange people like this. And basically, because they became a commodity, they are not anymore perceived in their human limitations. They are seen as a problem. A commodity, you just program it to do and execute a task. But they are human beings. And they are human beings with their weaknesses and their capacity and their strengths. So it's very interesting to see that shipping sees the people on board are the problem. And we definitely have to need to change. We have a need to change to see the people as a solution in order to have a proper data flow and quality in order to enhance the industry. In conclusion, always choose learn over blame. Learning occurs at all levels, and I think it's very interesting to always keep in mind you have learning everywhere for everyone. And we are in a system in shipping where you have a clear distinction between the ship and the shore, and for us it's extreme distinction between ship and shore. Work reality, the big issue that we have in shipping is the inability to report work realities. And I'm happy to see some of operational people like myself. It's interesting to see our reality may be very different than what the people perceive. Building trust, cooperation, to always obtain an accurate picture of what's happening in terms of safety. Because we tend to have in shipping in the recent past, copy and paste some of the receipt, I would say, safety receipt from other sectors, and they completely fail, miserably fail, because they are not adapted to how the people do the work, what is the work, and what is the status of the industry. The idea is very much to develop a systemic accident prevention, but we talked about it, and to include qualitative research. So learning is vital to identify challenges faced by frontline operation and to select appropriate situation. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you very much, Raphaël.
Thank you.
Please also join us and take a seat. Very interesting, and I very much liked your small sarcasm in your presentation. Now, I think we're very good in timing, and now we have an open floor for questions in here from the audience, but also from the online participants. And maybe just to get us into the questioning attitude, I see there's lots of coming up already, just to summarize a little bit. So we had Conrad from the nuclear power side of things, talking about the Davis-Spesse event, it was not an accident. It was I think it was 17 centimeters hole that was obviously overlooked or not inspected, we don't know. It was corrosion, that was the root cause, but of course there are processes to sort of catch that error in some sense. Then we moved over to Marc from the air traffic control, air traffic management, aviation world. Not only you fly safer now, but you also know that we need a just culture where we encourage people to report their mistakes, where they trust us and management to tell, the real things that happen without any fear of punishment or anything like that. That's the just culture that we want to have, and it's very difficult to go there. And then Raphaël reiterated that trust and motivation and passion, I personally believe, is really important for safety culture. And leadership, so it's you here in this room who lead safety, and I encourage you to go to operational people and try to understand the operations there. Now I think let's start within the audience. Do you have any questions to any of our speakers here? Yes, please. If you could stand up, say your name, organization, and then your question, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is...
The mic's coming just because we have many.
Thank you. My name is Andrei Zakharov. I come from Estonia, from a local freight company named Operail. And if I can, I would like all of the panelists to maybe comment briefly on how you deal with the motivational part in learning and helping people to learn. That would be very, very interesting to hear. Thank you.
Who would like to jump in?
The motivational part of learning, you said.
Yeah, how do you motivate people to learn? And what we heard from the previous presentation.
So maybe some tips and tricks on how to, encourage the learning.
Well, I think that the motivation is also a question of leadership. Is by using coaching techniques, by being in the field and encouraging people to do better their job, asking about what are the difficulties they have, what are the problems they need to be solved. I think that the key is management going in the field rather than staying in the computer and in the desk.
Absolutely. I'd like to, reiterate that. I asked the question in the beginning, how many people with operational licenses do we have in the room? And it was only few. It's so important to, go down there to understand the operations and why the decisions made sense to people at the time. Marc, how do you motivate people to learn?
When you report, so in aviation, you have to report. When you report your source of knowledge, your source of information, as an organization, you have to value that. So that means basic things like, we acknowledge that we have received your report, even if it's mandatory, okay? We acknowledge, thank you very much. And then you need to be able to give that to a guardian of the operational knowledge, whoever that will be it a safety manager or a peer who can assess what you have written. And then provides further contacts, being like, come back to the person and say, I just got your report. I don't understand you. So it's a colleague of yours. Can you explain? And you can explain. And then based on that, the report is being published internally. And then feedback. Feedback is absolutely important. Feedback can be various things. You can do that in refresher training. You can do that by publishing reports. always with the confidentiality clause, so you have to be confidential, but you can open up, you can anonymize the things, you can describe the thing, that the people learn. It is helpful that I know that something happened to my colleague in the eastern part of Switzerland. And then, last but not least, at Eurocontrol we have this fabulous library which is called Skybrary, where you also can go into, and you have nearly all the accident incidents reports, you have lessons learned. It's a vast library, so it's some sort of Alexandrian library of aviation where you get a lot of information. With that, the people are not demotivated, or the people are not frustrated when they report. If you report and you find your report, like just recently in Greece, on the headline of a newspaper, then of course you are less motivated, okay? So you also need to have all these protection mechanisms put in place, which actually is a European law.
Thanks, Marc. So encourage reporting and do something with the report, timely feedback. Raphael, you said it's always nice to look outside and sort of forget the inside, so maybe you could give your view on how you motivate people to learn.
How do I? Maybe we can think about the industry. I mean, when I would speak more about my own industry, it's easier for me. I'm sorry, I'm not...
Okay, we can transfer.
Okay, you can transfer and maybe take it off. I think the first element is treated people, as human beings, not as commodities. I mean, that's very simple. It looks very simple, but it's treating people normally, having them securing their career, securing their life over a long time period, and not taking them when I want and putting them away when I want. This is the very basic. If you don't create a feeling of belonging, we are belonging to the same company, we're all working together to the same aim, basically you will not be able to motivate anyone. And that's a big issue. Providing decent working and living condition, and I think there is a lot to do in shipping, again. I mean, when I mention what is the regulation now, I know what's happening also on ferries, I know what's happening on many segments of the industry. We're still on these numbers on ferries and many segments of the industry because most of the companies just think, I respect the law. The law says 98 hours of work per week. This is what we have today. I've been recently on ferries because I'm doing some research on ferries. They were working, all the people on the ferry was 84 hours per week, 2 weeks in a row. So it makes 164, I don't remember, 68 hours in 2 weeks' time. This is far beyond any of other industry in a 2 week period, far beyond. So this is the idea of going beyond what is the regulation. The regulation says this, but probably at one point you have to question the regulation and its capacity to address the problems. Very important, but I think you highlighted very clearly, it's the idea that when people report something, just don't close the door. Just listen. Just listen and do something. Demonstrate you are doing something. When I've done a lot of research on fatigue, and when seafarers report the problem of fatigue and violation of this 98 hours, because it's violation, the companies
Raphael,
don't reply.
Let's not talk about FRMS in fatiguing.
Because you're going to talk
because
about
we have
it
lots
later.
of questions
Okay.
here as well.
Sorry.
So can I just get you together here? Some tips, some tips and hints here. Yeah, some more questions, please.
Marc on. Can you hear me? Sorry.
And you posted it as well, right?
Okay. Yeah, I also wrote the question there. So Luca Save from the Italian company Day1. The question is inspired by what Marc was saying about the short-term conflict alerts. So he said in the past, we used to be suspended if there was a short-term conflict alert. So the assumption was there is some problem and no questions, you are suspended. Now the situation, since many years, has changed. So maybe the question is more for you, Michaela, with your experience.
We work together.
You decide. I mean, do you think, for example, for the analogy with the SPADs, that can be quite similar? And nowadays, in many countries, but for sure in Italy, it is assumed that if there is a SPAD, the driver has to be suspended. Then there are further investigation, we see. But there is a sort of default assumption that he will or she will require some sort of retraining. Do you think, this is going to change in some way? Inspired by just culture criteria, or it is right that it is like that, so it cannot be like in aviation. It has to be different. Maybe also Marc can have an opinion on that, so as you prefer.
Thanks for your question, Luca. Maybe just to put the floor straight here, also in aviation, also air traffic controllers and train drivers are released from position after a short-term conflict alert, after a SPAT, after a near miss. They are relieved from position because we want to understand what happened. Also, maybe they are emotionally in a state where they're not supposed to do a safety-critical task. That's okay. Also, crew, when they go down, they are grounded if they had an event. But then the difference to rail is the investigation starts, the why. And this is where I want to hand over to Marc. So what happens to the controller after he's relieved from working position?
So there are two things. One is we look after the person. That means we offer critical incident stress management. In some companies, you have to do it. Meaning what? You have a traumatic event, your professional totem has just crumbled because you did something you shouldn't be doing. So no accident, just in an incident, serious incidents. And then you take the people out, just quickly, and then you check. And if there is nothing really serious, you just let them go back to work. Okay? If they want to go back to work, and you just let them go back to work. So that's what we are doing. However, the other side of the coin, if we have a short-term conflict alert, as I showed you, if I don't report that, the safety department will come to me and say, you were busy, you've forgotten to file a report, because they are kind. But basically, that's then the error. If I don't report what has been seen as a data system, and which is not a false alarm, okay? Because that's also a feedback loop where it's not just, as we call it in French, bisounours, it's not just a fairy tale, these things. Huh? It's also, there is a control mechanism there as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that gives a good idea. Huh? It's do the investigation, understand why things happen, and there's absolutely, in my view, no problem to get the driver back on the train if everything is cleared, but participate in a safety interview. Don't be sent home sick for weeks, as some rail organizations do that. Luca, are you okay? Yeah? Thank you. And another question from the audience as we go to the... Yes, Gregory, and then the gentleman in the back. Can we get a microphone to Gregory? Oh, you've got the... Yeah, sure.
So,
yeah.
You've seen that UIC and ERA was trying to have this peer review regime. So we all know that it works very well in the nuclear industry. So how could we do for making it work like in the nuclear industry? What are the ingredients for having these peer review regimes?
Well, I think that one of the main things is explaining, because for doing good peer reviews, what you call peer reviews, which for us a peer review is, as I told you, is a broader thing. You need experts. You need experts, and you need a good method. The method, you have it. The method you have it is like the method that we developed in the nuclear, and I'm sure that it's the method that others are using. The key is to convince people that an expert is simply somebody that has experience. I've had excellent missions with people that never participated in a peer review, that were never trained to be a peer, that just received the basic training on how to conduct the mission on Sunday, and they did an excellent job, and they enjoyed so much. Because the only thing you do is to go to a plant that it's not yours, open your eyes, open your ears, don't ask the right questions, observe the right things, and write those things in a report. And for doing that, you only need to have experience. And you don't need to be the best professional in your area. I've also seen experts that were in plants that were not the best in their area, but they were encountering the same problems that other plant that they were assessing. So they were able to provide their own experience rather than somebody else that they are very good in that area but had no experience in improving in that area. So knowing how to improve is key also. So that means the key is an expert is somebody that works in an area and has experience. That's full stop.
And asks the right questions and listens to
And asks the right
operational
questions,
stuff.
yeah.
That's the thing. There's a gentleman over there. I think we can have one more before I'd like to come to those three here. Please wait for the microphone.
Hello, Aki Römonen from Bear Group, Finland. I would like to ask a question about just culture.
Yeah.
As the just culture is an important step in safety culture improvement, when an organization has introduced just culture, how should it handle intentional lying for oneself, or when someone lies for others, thus hindering investigation?
Yeah.
Lies?
How do you handle lying was the question. Did you understand? Yeah, maybe I repeat. How to handle if someone intentionally lies. We all know James Reason, you have unintentional acts, intentional acts. If I throw something at you, this is an intentional thing. So if someone covers up, like the example Marc mentioned of not reporting, right? Maybe he forgot, or maybe he purposely did that. How do you handle that in your industries? Maybe Raphaël.
I mean, this is.
It's a clear answer there, I think.
Yes, it's very simple for us.
It's very simple.
It's basically all the time. So basically, it's built on that, and it's very complicated not to lie, I would say, for many people. Not all, but for many people, it's complicated.
I think for me, let's give the human the benefit of the doubt, okay? Let's say that we employ people that are good people. No one intentionally runs over a stop signal. Every train driver knows to stop in red. And he doesn't need retraining, but he very well knows how to brake a train. But understand what the situation was at the time, what was going on, the conditions, the working conditions, and so on. Let's try to give the human the benefit of the doubt. And then, when it comes down in the investigation that there was an intentional act, you can still look into further disciplinary measures, which, of course, if it was a reckless behavior, is necessary. I'd like to tie in, and I'd like to tie in a question with Gregory, and then it's 1 o'clock. Marc, one more comment.
Just quickly, there are different rules which we need to keep in mind. When you report in a just culture environment, there is in the EU law an article which foresees that internally in the organization you can already start to assess if the person is limit. So if he overstepped this line or not. And there you have certain rights and certain duties when you start this investigation. So we have a safety arbitration panel inside our company. There are just culture committees where these behaviors, where you say, this doesn't make sense. Maybe the person is lying, or maybe the person is protecting something, where these things need to be unraveled, okay? But then there's also the judiciary side. We are not in a vacuum. At a certain stage, if something very serious happens, or if there is a damage to an aircraft, if there is damage to life, prosecution will come as well. And then your role is completely different. Then the role of the reporter or the person who is being prosecuted is a legal known role. So you have your right, you can be a witness, you can be an interested person, you can be an accused. And then you have completely different rights. But in the safety process, there are mechanisms where we already can test how far the person is, let's say, honest within a reasonable professional expectation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm afraid it's time to close this session, but what I can offer without speaking to my panelists, that we can answer those questions in the break remotely briefly on Slido, because the answers are easy to make. Yeah, I think it's time to conclude.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you
very much for this very interesting session on learning from safety critical industries. And one thing that works in every universal language and improves your safety culture highly is, what do you guess? Chocolate, exactly. So because you were all so great on my panel, you owe a chocolate.
Thank you very much.